Hey everybody, Jeff here. So I've been working on this series of Capture One videos that are geared towards the beginner, somebody who has just downloaded this program and opened it up and are navigating in a sessions workflow, how to get their images into the program, how to edit the images. We'll look at getting the images out of the program today in this video. And so if you haven't seen the first video, this is the second in the series, you're going to want to click this link up here and go watch that video first. Follow those steps, shoot some images on your camera, import them into the program from the card, and we're going to go from there. So today we're going to look at looking at how we can maybe, tag these images with different color tags, or we can rate them, how to set up, special albums that we can organize those particular images into, and we'll look at tethering with Capture One. So if you want to look at like the tethered workflow, that's a really nice workflow to work with in the program. So first things first, here's our Capture One session, this image here that we were working on last time. You can see we've done a little bit to it here. We've done a little bit of brightening with the exposure slider, a little bit of punchiness with this contrast slider, and a little bit of saturation. And then we wanted to bring up our shadows here. So you'll notice if you look at these little widgets that are right here, there's a couple of important ones. The little question mark there will actually open up Chrome or Safari or whatever program browser you're using and bring you to tutorials on that particular tool in Capture One. You'll see here that there's this icon that looks like in sort of a revert arrow, and that's exactly what it'll do. If I click that, it'll undo those changes. It'll set everything back to 0 for me. But if I just want to see the before and then the after, on the Mac I can hold the Option key, on the PC it's the Alt key, and I can hold the Option key or Alt, and I can click that little revert. I'm continuing to hold the Option key, and I let go again, so it shows me the before, after, as I'm holding the Option Alt key, before, after. I can do that up here on this window. I can say before, after, and it shows me the exposure, contrast, and saturation changes before and after that I made. That's a nice way to see the before and after of a set of things that I've done to a particular image. Now let's say I want to get into like looking at these images and ranking and rating. If I come down to this next one here and I say, okay, well, let's give it a little contrast, let's brighten it up a bit. Let's crank down those highlights, get some of that blue sky back, maybe like look at some, opening the shadows a bit, and I can bring my saturation up a touch, and I can see, okay, that's looking better. And I decide that, I want to rank or rate some of these images. So in the previous video, I had renamed an image, and that rodeo, when I renamed it rodeo, and you can see that it's now, I've popped over the browser, and now it's down at the bottom, indicating that, well, it looks like the browser is wanting to organize and sort these alphabetically or by name. So I can come up to my View menu, View, Sort, and maybe instead I want to sort them by date, by the date that I shot them. So I can choose Date, and these are now actually the order at which that they were shot chronologically. I would go in and I would want to probably change my names though and say, well, what are these? Maybe that's the best way to go. So this would be, let's see, I would say it would be like if it's an architecture shot, whatever it is I want to name it, and then maybe this is like a portrait. Okay, so great, I've named all my files, and you can see that with my sorting here, View, Sort, Name, that it's set up alphabetically. Architecture A, Benny the dog, B, Flower, F, Glacier, G. You can see here Gnome House and Gnome House Color, J.W. Teller, local musician here, Missoula, this beer, Pirat, and rodeo. So it's setting up that way. Now if I was shooting another way and I wanted things chronologically showing up, like if I'm tethering and I want each shot to show up at the bottom, the new one, I would want to sort this by date so that the newest shot is populating underneath. That way I can kind of keep track of what's happening. If it's coming in by name and I'm changing the names, it's going to want to organize things alphabetically like that. So in this scenario, let's say if I'm looking through and I say, oh, there's this architecture shot, I really like it, I'm going to give it 5 stars. I can hit the 5 on the keyboard and you'll see 5 stars roll across. I can also choose this little box here and it gives me the ability to tag it with a color. So maybe I have, said that all things that are green are my hero images. Maybe I have one that's like more of a, well, maybe, and I can tag that red. So this is sort of like, preferential, whatever it is you want to do with this. I tend to stick with like keeping it simple. If something's like for a particular use and it's the hero image green, if it's something I'm using just for Photoshop, I might tag it blue or yellow, so I know that's just a Photoshop sort of asset that I'm going to use, that sort of thing. So it depends on how you want to organize things. But now we have, 5-star image with a green tag. Maybe this is one where I'm like, oh, I like this, a lot. I'm going to give it 5 stars, so it's in that category. But it's not an architecture shot, it's a dog shot, so maybe I'm going to tag that orange. So all of my like architectural shots are green, all of my other are orange. Like this would be like an other shot, so I'd tag that orange. Sure, 5 stars. Oh, here's a landscape. Maybe I'm going to tag that with a different color altogether. We'll tag landscapes with yellow. It's okay. It looks like it needs some work. If I could just go in and do a quick bit here. Got a big hunk of hair on the sensor, so that's not good. I'm going to have to work with that. Got quite a bit of shadow work to do here on it as well. I want it to seem realistic. I would have to take an image like this probably into Photoshop to see if I can clone that out, which would be no problem. I could get rid of all that, the sensor bits there, no problem. Adding a little bit of a black point in this one. So, this is the idea, is that I can color code things based upon my preference. I can also tag files with numbering system 1 through 5. If that's something I want to do. Now, in terms of tethering, let's say you would like to be able to work, you're shooting in a controlled situation, like you have some food that you're shooting by your window, let's say, and you have nice natural light coming in and you want to shoot that. You have your camera on tripod or your hand holding, and you want to be able to have some control over sort of moving things around and taking the next shot to see changes. That's where you would need some sort of tether cable. A very popular company that makes tether cables is Tether Tools. You can look them up and you can find your specific camera and find the correct connection. So you would want to find the connection that's going to allow you to plug in coming out of the computer. So you'd be looking for the female port on your computer and what that is, whether it's USB-C or USB-A or Thunderbolt, and then looking at your camera itself to see what its connection is here, what that looks like, as well as looking at the specs of the camera online to see what it's called, in this case USB 3.0, and at which point I would take that appropriate cable and I would plug it in to my machine, and I'm going to plug it into my camera here. And then when I go to turn the camera on, if I bounce over here, my little widgets up here, and I choose the camera icon, and I come down here to the camera window itself, you'll see that it's blank right now. My camera is off. And when I turn it on, it's going to populate with the camera information there, which is kind of nice. Now, to note a couple things here, these little windows here that pop open with these carrots, they're totally adjustable. I can move them into different positions just by dragging them around, and you'll see there's that little orange little sort of halo that shows up there indicating where it's going to drop. If I lose one or I don't have one and I'm looking for a window, I can come under Window and choose Create Floating Tool. And all of these items that are available as floating windows are available here under this Window Create Floating Tool area, which creates a floating tool. Like for example, if I decided to come down and grab this filters one, and I could take it, and if I don't want it to be a floating window, I can then drop it down here and it shows up in this area, and I can move it into the position that I want it to be in. If I don't want it there, maybe there's some tools here that are bogging me down and I don't want all that stuff, it's too confusing, I just want the simple stuff, I can drag that out and I can choose the little ellipse right here on the right, and I can choose Remove Tool, and it goes away. But it's okay, I can always get it back. It's just under this Window, Create Floating Tool. So we've got our camera connected. We've opened up our camera window here, and I'm going to turn the camera on, and you'll see that it will populate here. And it says it's Canon 5D Mark IV. Right now it's at 2/50th of a second f5, 1/25th. And then when I go to, focus and shoot something, and I'll just shoot my main light right here, you'll see that it populates right into the program. Something to note here is if I look under the camera tab here, and I I look around for what I'm looking for is the file name. So the next capture naming right here, okay? And it always will default with whatever my session name is when I started that folder on the desktop to begin with. And what I need to do is I need to say, well, if I'm in a tethered environment, I really want to have control over the name. So ostensibly, if I was taking pictures of this gridded key light here, I'd want to call it that. I'd say key light. And write a little hyphen and hit tab to get out of that. And you'll see that now when I go to take a shot there, that it's going to append that file with the name key light. And that's a really nice feature. If you're working in a tethered environment, you'll want to make your first stop that next capture naming and plug in the name of that thing that you're about to shoot. And that way the raw file gets tagged with that name. And when you process out that JPEG, it also will be tagged with that same name, and they'll be matched. They won't be like two different names. And that's an important organizational feature here. But this is, a really nice thing with Capture One. It's super robust in terms of being able to tether and shoot a lot of shots. I mean, I could come in here and I could change, for example, my drive, and I could shoot a whole slew of shots, and you'll see that they are continually populating into the program here. So I shot 20 shots, this key light, and there they all are, same shot. Obviously, it would all be different shots, but you can see with a program like this, the tethering capabilities are much more robust than what you get in Lightroom. Lightroom tends to have quirks. There's a lot less cameras that are able to tether to Lightroom, whereas in Capture One, there's a lot more cameras available to tether to it. And I mean, I've worked on projects where we shoot 50,000 images to a session, and it hums right along, no problem. As long as you have a fast machine, everything is cool. And so, it can handle a lot of data being shot to it. It can handle, fashion photography scenarios where we're shooting on motor drive. It's going to be populating these images into the program. Now, something to remember about Capture One is that it's not actually recording anything to the card simultaneously. It's only sending the data to the machine. So your photograph is being sent to the computer. There's no backup being held to the card. It's just on the machine. So this is why, a lot of photographers will have, hard drives available so that we can back up the session immediately, continuously in some cases, backing up to hard drives, or on lunch backup, and then at the end of the day do another backup, but really looking to protect those assets so that nothing bad happens along the way. Hard drive decides to die and you lose your whole job, But if you're backing this up to an external drive, that's the way to go. Now, you could certainly have an external hard drive and plug it into your machine and set up your session to shoot to that hard drive. If it's a solid state hard drive, it's going to work faster than a spinning disk RPM type of external drive. However, the solid state hard drive that's embedded in your actual computer is much, much faster than any of the external drives that are going to be trying to send this data down a tether cable and then through the computer and then down another cable into a hard drive. So shooting your sessions directly to external drives could slow you down. And so it's not necessarily a recommended workflow. Typically, a lot of folks will shoot right to their computer and have a system in place that can back things up using different types of software programs, or just manually picking up that Capture One session and dragging it to a hard drive that's plugged in and backing it up, a few times throughout the shoot. So now that we've looked at how you can organize, you can rename your files. We've looked at, a simple edit with a file. We've looked at tagging it with different colors depending upon your preference, or a rating 1 through 5 stars. We can look at how we might be able to organize assets in the program. So if I come here to my library. And I'll open up my library. I'll notice over here in this area that there are these session albums available to us. Now, if I wanted an album that's, let's say just my orange tagged items, right? I could certainly come over here and choose an album. And I could say, these are my orange selects, like so. And I can choose OK. And it shows up here a little album. It looks like a little stack of like 4x5 prints over here is what I'd like to think it is. And I can grab this shot of Benny, and I can grab the shot of the flower, and I can drag them over here to my orange selects folder, okay? And now I have them separated into a separate album. Now you'll notice if I come to the disk level, if I go and look at the actual session folder and I look in that capture folder, it's all there. It didn't move Benny or the flower, the orange selected files, to any other folder. They're still living in that capture folder. And all it did is it created a virtual organization system for me so that I can kind of keep things organized within the software without it actually moving anything around on disk. And not only that, but you can see it's also back in my capture folder. So if I wanted to come here and make some adjustments, I can come to Benny here in my virtual organization, and I can say, well, maybe I want to take Benny and make him black and white. Okay, and go there. And I look back at my capture folder, and you'll see that that change is reflected on the raw file back here in my capture folder. Again, this is all being done in the software, and all of this information is being saved and stored here in this co-session file, similar to that Lightroom catalog file. Although this isn't a catalog, this is a single standing session here. But all those changes are being saved in that folder. And you can see that if I look at the capture again and I find Benny, here's the Benny thumbnail, and Benny's still in color as the raw file because that's how it was captured. It's just the software that's showing me these different edits. So it's a nice way to work in that I can have this, organized area over here for everything that I've selected as orange, or maybe all of my green selects. Maybe I have some certain selects that are like the hero files that I want to keep separated out. Like maybe this shot here, I've decided I want to send to my selects folder. That's different. That's actually moving that file. You'll see it's disappeared now out of this area, and I've moved it physically to another folder altogether. So you'll see that back here, there's an empty spot where that mountain range was from the capture folder, and now that file lives in my selects folder. This is just another workflow. If you prefer to be able to move those out of the sort of bulk captures and separate all your hero images, the ones that you want to keep, the non-duds, out into a separate selects folder altogether and still access it here in the program, that is just a workflow that's available to you. Some people prefer to organize things at disk level like that. Some people prefer to have these sort of virtual organization, kind of like what you do in Lightroom. It's no real, one is better than the other. It's just how you prefer to work. So now let's say you want to get a file out. Well, let's say I have this image of Benny here, and I want to do a couple things. I want to put a crop on Benny, and I want to export Benny out to the internet so that I can put him up on my Instagram feed, let's say. So first thing I need to do is I need to get over to my area where I might find the crop, right? A couple places you can find this. Right now it's living under my little lens correction icon. And there's my crop, okay? And there's the ratios. I could put a particular ratio. Let's say I want to give it a square crop. And I can come in here and I can grab my crop tool, and I can grab an edge of the crop tool and it snaps into place, and I can put a square crop on Benny, and maybe I'll bring it in a little tighter like so. And let's say that that's the crop that I want to give Benny. I'm going to hit my little hand or my select arrow up here, and it'll show me that crop. If I decide I want to change that crop, that's okay. I can come back to the crop tool, and it shows me that nothing has been permanently done here. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit the little hand. I'm going to say, let's crop Benny square. And I'm going to send Benny out to Instagram. I want to be able to get to this file and email it to myself so that I can load it to my Instagram, let's say. So let's take a look at the process window. If we come down these little widgets here, you'll see the singular gear. And you'll see there's a number of sort of set up already for you recipes. There's a couple different ways to think about that. So you have two areas of this window. You have something that's targeted. In this case, TIFF Adobe RGB 1998 is targeted. It's selected in this sort of like light gray here, right? I can target sRGB, JPEG, or one of these other ones. I can target them. And all that does when I target them is it shows me the parameters, the adjustable parameters of that particular recipe. It doesn't mean that when I develop this file out that that is the thing that's going to develop out. To do that, I have to enable it with the check mark. So that it's two separate areas. One is to see the actual recipe and the parameters of it, and that's targeting it here in the gray, or in this case now orange. But to actually get it to process that recipe, I would have to enable it with this check mark, right? So in my situation, I'm like, well, I want a pretty specific sized thing to come out. I want a 2,000 pixel square, 2,000 pixel on one edge, 2,000 pixel on the other edge, square, JPEG. That's fairly small in file size. So I'm going to create a new Instagram recipe for myself. And I'm going to come down here to this little plus sign. And I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to call this Instagram square. Okay? I know it's going to be a JPEG. I don't need to worry too much about that. And so now that I've created it, I need to change its parameters. I'm going to come here to the format, and I'm going to choose JPEG. And here's my quality slider. I want it to be an sRGB color because that's the web space color. For black and white, it's not going to make too much of a difference here, but for any other color image, that would be more critical. I'm not going to worry about resolution at all. What I need to get to under scale is that I need to get to either width and height and plug in 2,000 pixel for both of those, or long edge and just say 2,000 pixels, right? So width and height, I would change under inches, this to pixels, and I would say 2,000 pixels. Right there. I'm not going to open it with anything. I don't want it to automatically open with Photoshop or something like that. I just want it to save it to my output folder as a JPEG. And I'm going to come here to the little file window. It's telling me the default output location, which is that output folder, is where the JPEG is going to be sent. I could send it into a subfolder called JPEGs for Instagram if I wanted, simply by creating that subfolder here. And it would, inside my output folder, create another folder called JPEGs for Instagram. Under adjustments, in this case, I can tell it to either ignore the crop and it'll send it out as the full-sized image. I don't want that. I want it to crop the image for me. So I'm going to choose Respect Crop. And under metadata, I can send it out with the copyright, GPS coordinates, camera metadata, rating and color tag if I want, and any other annotations overlay, more advanced features. And then if I wanted a watermark on my file, I could actually upload, just like you can in Lightroom, an image watermark or some sort of text watermark to say, copyright my name if I wanted to do that. So I've now set up this process recipe so that anytime I enable Instagram Square, it's going to respect the crop that I have on it, and it's going to send out a JPEG at 2,000 pixels on the long edge. And as I cruise down this list, it tells me here's the output location, and here's the output naming. It says custom name. It's going to send it out the name that I have, Benny0009, right? And it gives me a process summary. It says, okay, with the parameters we've set here, we've got the recipe of Instagram Square, the name of the file, the pixel dimensions of the file, the scaling of the file, and the color space, and the quality, and the size of the file, 3 megabytes. Now, sometimes you might be working with a website and it'll say something like, it wants the file to be under a particular kilobit in size, right? So if you run into that, that's where the quality slider comes in, and you would bring your quality slider down and notice that my file size down here on process summary drops as the quality slider goes down. So the quality slider is compressing the file further, compressing that JPEG. The lower that goes, the more pixelated and crunchy your image is going to look. So, you got to be aware of that. But if you drop it a little bit, you can get your file size down. If you're working with a website that says, please keep it under 500 kilobytes, then I would want to look at this and say, oh, I need to drop my quality slider a ways so that it's under that 500, 484, sure. And then I know that I'm good to go there. And at that point, I'm ready to develop the file. And you'll see right under the process recipe here, there's a little process toggle here with a little progress bar indicator. So when I have Benny chosen over here and I've set up my recipe and I figure out, okay, Yep, it's under the kilobyte size that this particular thing is looking for. It's going to transfer nice and quickly. I mean, with Instagram, I could have my quality slider up higher. It's going to take a larger megabyte size file, but in the interest of showing you in those times where you might run into a parameter like that, or it's asking for a smaller JPEG, this is where you can create that smaller JPEG. Now I can hit this process button, and it'll happen real quick. Boom, it's done. It puts a little orange gear right here when it's actively processing. And when it's actively done, it'll turn gray like this. I can come to my session, and I go to my output folder, and you'll see there is the Benny file that I would email to myself and upload to Instagram. So this was part 2 of a multi-part series looking at sort of the beginner basics of Capture One Pro. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up sign. If you didn't, you know what to do. You can leave a comment down below. We'll get back to you if you'd like. Feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want more of this content. Hit the little bell so that you can get notified of more of this content. Thank you to Canon for providing some of the camera equipment to make these possible. Thanks for watching.